So welcome back, everybody. This is John with SwingFit. Today, we're going to continue to build on our wedge fitting process to help you understand what is step number 2. And that kind of reminds me, if you didn't get a chance to watch yesterday's video, then definitely do yourself a favor. Click on this floating iCard somewhere around here and actually watch yesterday's video first, because we helped you understand why loft is our number 1 step in our wedge fitting process before we can actually get to step 2, which is bounce selection. And not only are we going to share some tips and tricks along the way to help you pick and narrow down the bounce selection for your set of wedges, but we're also going to help you understand why it might be beneficial to choose different bounces in your set makeup. So without further ado, let's jump in and find out why bounce is so critical. So before we dive deep into our process, I do want to take a quick second to welcome any new viewers to the channel. So if you are interested in learning more about the club fitting process, I mean gain a deeper understanding of why a club fitter might do certain things during the fit, then I can promise you, you are in the right place and you're just a couple clicks away from gaining access to this information each and every single week. So consider hitting that subscribe button below, turn on that bell so that way you receive an alert when we drop our new content. Now there's 2 general terms I need to make sure you're familiar with, so this way you understand how we help our customers select the correct bounce, which is static bounce and effective bounce. And static bounce is nothing more than the bounce that's stamped on the bottom of your wedges. I mean, I'm talking right off the shelf, what is the stated bounce? Is it 10, 12, 14, maybe even 3 or 4? I mean, it is what it is. But then there's this term called effective bounce. And here we just need to understand that the golf club is always working in motion, and depending on the shot you're trying to execute and your delivery, you might either add more bounce or actually take bounce off. And this is why this is critical that we understand how you swing and deliver the golf club. And the best form of illustration I like to use in order to drive home the impact of dynamic loft and effective bounce is the iceberg image, right? Because it's not necessarily important of what is above the surface when we're talking about bounce, but it is what is below the surface. So here in this picture, if the water surface line represents the grass blades, right? That first layer of turf, and then the dirt was the everything underneath of it, then as we present more dynamic loft, you will see that we're actually exposing more of that trailing edge bounce, right? So here in this situation, depending on your turf conditions, you know, if it is a little firmer and you expose and like to flip your hands, then there's a pretty dang on good chance that that bounce is going to do exactly that. It's going to come into the contact with the turf first, and that leading edge is going to hop up and blade the ball across the green. Now, on the other hand, what if the lie is more that of a fluffy lie? Maybe the ball's setting up or in a beach-like sand bunker. That bounce can actually be your best friend. So even though you like to flip or add a little dynamic loft, that can actually be to your benefit, because that bounce, that extra material that's exposed down below, will actually cause the club to bounce and actually pop up and keep it from just gliding underneath of the golf ball. So now let's get back to the fitting process, and as we start to watch these initial shots unfold, you know, let's help you understand what is the set makeup that we're building towards. Now the customer only has room for 3 wedges in his bag, and if you watch yesterday's video, that means we're going to have to follow a 5-degree loft progression, which means we're looking at a 54 and a 59 to complete his set. And these series of shots was executed with an SM8 Vokey 56-degree wedge with 10 degrees of bounce. Now, this is going to be your first very golden nugget, because I know you're thinking, well, John, didn't you just say we needed the 54? Well, this is a little trick that club fitters will use to just give them more options to pick and choose from. Here, we know that we have more options in the 56-degree line, so if we bend the loft back, we just need to understand what is the implication of what do we do to the bounce. So write this down. Anytime you take loft off by 2 degrees, 1 degree, you're going to subtract the same amount of bounce from the stated bounce. So in this example, we went from a 56.10 to a 54.8. and it would just be in reverse if you were to add loft. So now when we take a look at the numbers on the cover, this thing looks pretty dang good. It's checking a lot of the boxes. We got a perfect gapping. We want to be 10 to 15 yards, and we're right at 111. We got that great apex, great landing angle. Even the spin's awesome. I mean, everything about this, I'm like, yeah, sold. Let's go ahead and put this in the bag if it wasn't for the customer's feedback. And that was he said sometimes the club head almost kind of felt easy to pass his hands, on those full swing shots. So how we verify is, let's take a look at the dynamic loft. When we look at this, there is a fair amount of fluctuation here, and I like to see that more consistent or tighter. So we're as low as 41 degrees and as high as 46. And once again, I just want to minimize that, and bounce is one of the best ways in order to do so. And actually grind does play a factor in this, and that's just, how wide or how much material is actually on the bottom of that wedge. But we'll get into grinds tomorrow, but today's focus is definitely on bounce. So let's take a look at this next series of shots. Now in this series of shots, we was using the SM8 Vokey 56-degree wedge with 12 degrees of bounce, and of course we turned it down to 54, which also turned bounce back to 10 degrees. So a little bit more bounce than that of the first option. And when we take a look at the numbers, I need to help you understand something here that's going on with these, because this wedge actually went shorter than the previous one, and the explanation is the bounce. So take a look. So as we add more bounce and the customer swinging, he's actually losing ball speed. Why? Because the club is actually slowing down. It's actually more bounce and is coming into interaction with the turf. And that's one of the number one things a club fitter is trying to do, is we're trying to get you in and out of the turf as efficiently as we possibly can. So that in itself is enough for me to say, you know what, this isn't the right one, because we actually went the wrong direction. So based on that information, we need to go the other way. So we're going to go back down to lower bounce, and in this next series of shots, we're going to actually be using the 5608 turned down to 5406. Now, there's no disputing that those shots was definitely hands down better. He almost even dropped a couple of them in the cup. So let's take a look at the numbers here. And when I look, this definitely is a lot better. And you remember the number one concern we had with the previous one was that dynamic loft fluctuation. And when we take a look, I mean, just look how consistent it is. It's almost 43, 44 consistent, with the exception of that very last one. And just understand that, that lower bounce will allow the club head to pass. But the thing is, as long as it passes without impeding speed or performance. So when we look at this last shot, was we able to get the 110 that we was hoping to? And when we look over, sure enough, and it was actually 4'7" from the cup. So definitely that helped out. And it's just going to give the customer a little bit of forgiveness that he needs, as well as protection in case he does let that club head pass his hands. And as we look at the compare tab below, this is already starting to turn into a nice wedge set composition for the customer. Really gives them that versatility, a little added protection to be creative around the golf course. Hit those full shots in half, perfect gapping, and with 2 wedges down, we got one more to go, which is tomorrow's video, where we're going to be diving deep into the significance of grind and how grind can potentially help you build the best Swiss Army knife. So in closing, we truly hope you found value in this information we shared with you today. If nothing else, we at least now hope you have a little better understanding of the significance of bounce, and more importantly, how to determine what bounce might be best suited for the way you swing the golf club. And as a quick recap, just remember this. If that shaft does get a little vertical in the backswing, or you take big divots, then going with more bounce can potentially be your best friend, because it's going to prevent that leading edge from turning into a shovel. Now, if you have the tendency to square the club up with your body, more hinge hold type of, action, maybe it's a little shallower, you'd like to pick the ball clean, going lower bounce would be your best course of action. And then if you're somewhere in between, like tonight's customer, where you'd like to be able to pull off both of those, then go with something right in the middle of the road, something maybe with like 6 to 8 degrees of bounce would be a good choice for you. So if you have any questions or comments, do me a favor, leave them in the remarks below, and until tomorrow, thanks for watching.